Good evening, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you once again on this live stream. This has been an interesting week. The Nyingma meditation teacher, Anabtupten Rinpoche, has been with us, stayed at our place and did a talk over at Dharma Ocean on Tuesday night. And he's gone down to Crestone where he's going to do a program, and we're going down to be with him and continue a very interesting journey that has begun between his community, the Dharma Ta Foundation, and Dharma Ocean. This is a very, very unusual person, and I want to highly recommend him to you. He's in his 40s. He was, unlike most tulkus that we meet these days, he was born and brought up and educated in Tibet, in Golok in East Tibet, and received some very wonderful training from both lay people as well as monastic people. So in the old Nyingma tradition, he and I have formed quite a deep friendship, and a little bit like falling in love. And I was telling him that in terms of his really utter openness as a person and the wonderful depth and vastness of his awareness and his warmth, that the last time I met that was in Chogyam Trungpa. So it's been a very, very meaningful week for me personally, and I think for our lineage. And I was, in a way, joking on Tuesday night at the Boulder Dharma Ocean Center that our Sangha has suddenly doubled, because no doubt about it, there's some kind of ancient connection there, and the lineage that he holds and that I hold are the very same lineage. It's amazing. It's actually very, very shocking when I first met him a year ago down at the Blazing Mountain Retreat Center in Crestone when he was teaching a program. It was very shocking, and he came in and he sat down. I invited him for lunch because I had read one of his books and I'd seen some videos, and I just was really moved and deeply inspired by his teaching. And he came in and sat down, and we looked at each other, and I don't think we talked for about 45 minutes. It was very unusual. I can't really convey what it's like to be teaching as I have for all these years. And really, since Rinpoche died, truthfully, I felt very alone in a way, because I've been teaching what I have felt to be the depth of his lineage and the depth of his transmission to me and to other people in those very early years. But I didn't see anybody else really doing it, and I didn't see people outside of our Sangha really appreciating or even understanding what was going on. And somehow when I met Anam, one of his big, communications to me was, you're doing it and it's here, and I'm doing it and I'm here. And it was hugely encouraging for me. And one of the things he said was quite interesting. He said when he met me, he felt some kind of opening, and that he could really, truly be himself, and that everything was, the boundaries fell away. And I felt exactly the same way. And I can't really, I'm not really making any sense of it, but I don't need to. And it's just, it's very inspiring. And I think it's very significant and meaningful for all of us following the Dharma Ocean teachings and the Dharma Ocean lineage. We're definitely not the only ones. And there's Anam and his whole thing. And frankly, he is a brilliant meditation teacher. So something going on, and something very beautiful and very powerful. So tonight I want to do a guided practice with you, and I want to explore just a little bit further this theme of compassion that we are contemplating in this autumn, as our main theme. In the Buddhist tradition in general, of course, as you know, not only for the Mahayana, where compassion is very, very important, but also in the Vipassana tradition, in the Theravada tradition, in all its aspects, the teachings of compassion are central, really, to the whole Dharma. In the conventional Buddhist traditions and in the Mahayana, there is often a sense, I think, among us that compassion is it's something that we feel, it's something that we act out, that we enact, something we do. And there's a slightly dualistic feel to it. It's almost as if we, being one thing, give birth to compassion, which is something slightly different, and then that compassion is carried into the world. As I think I've already suggested, in the Vajrayana, compassion is not something we feel in the ordinary sense as an ordinary human feeling or emotion. And compassion is not something most fundamentally that we do. Compassion is a state of being. It's a way we are in our bodies, in our somas. It's a way we inhabit our human incarnation. And I want to do a little bit of guided practice with you tonight and show you what that might mean. So let's begin. So take your, whatever your posture of meditation may be, whether you're sitting on a cushion on the floor, whether you're sitting seiza style on your feet, whether you're sitting in a chair, whether you're sitting on a meditation bench like I am. And we'll go through the basic points of the Shikantaza posture, and then we'll go from there. So to begin with, breathing lightly into the lower belly. So we're going to pick a spot midway between the perineum and the navel, the lower dantian or the hara, and we're going to begin visualizing that we're bringing the breath directly into that place on each in-breath. So see if you can feel that. And let's visualize that on the in-breath, there's a balloon in our lower belly, and on the in-breath, the balloon inflates up to the size of maybe a goose egg. And on the out-breath, it deflates slightly. Filling on the in-breath, deflating slightly on the out-breath. And try to let yourself settle into the lower belly on the in-breath. Just relax into the space of the lower belly on the in-breath. any thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, images, memories, whatever may be coming up for you. On the in-breath, just dissolve them into the very center of the lower belly. Everything is folded in to the space in the lower belly on the in-breath. And when we're breathing into the lower belly, try to breathe right into the center of the lower belly and dissolve yourself into that center point. Just letting your being become very, very peaceful. As you breathe in, have the feeling of the space in the lower belly opening up. The space being very, very empty. And as you open, letting go of all the obstacles, all the debris, any clouds, any shadows. Let them fall out and away so that the space in the very center of the lower belly is empty and open and free. Looking into the lower belly, and continually a feeling of opening the space out from the very center and letting go of everything so that space is truly empty. And then as we continue to open the space in the lower belly on each in-breath, noticing that when we breathe in, we can actually dissolve ourselves into the very center of the space. We can dissolve our separate consciousness. See if you can do that. You're just breathing your consciousness, your separate awareness, your watcher. You're breathing that into the center of the space and letting go. Imagine there's a seam down the center of the space in the lower belly. And I'm going to count to 3 and say go. And when I say go, pull the space apart, pull the seams apart to the right and to the left. And as you do so, look right into what's on the other side. 1, 2, 3, go. There is an instantaneous gap after I say go, and there is just a space on the other side. And there is no watcher, there is no you. There's just space, being aware of space. It's what's called the self-awareness of the natural state. So one more time. So we're in the lower belly. We're breathing in. We're emptying out. We're going to visualize a seam down the middle of this empty space. Seam's totally empty. But we're going to pull the seam apart to the right and to the left when I say go. And in that instant that I say go, I want you to look and see what's on the other side when you pull the seam apart. 1, 2, 3, go. This space without a watcher, this self-cognizant state, is what in Zen is called your face before you were born. It's the beginning and the end of everything. It's our core. And strangely enough, empty though this space is, it holds within it our entire karmic history, past, present, and future. The more empty it is, the more it holds our unique personhood and the being that we are called to become in this life. One more time. Breathing into the lower belly, emptying out. Empty, empty, empty. Open, open, open. Very unconditioned space, but not completely so. Very close, but not quite it. And then a seam down the middle of that space in our lower belly. When I say go, we're going to pull the curtains apart, open the seam, and notice at the moment I say go, what's on the other side. 1, 2, 3, go. This is the famous elixir that heals all wounds. And resolves all woes. That resolves all our sorrows. And brings us openness and freedom and peace. And it's right here, living, naked and available in our lower belly. So now this empty, open, endless space, we're going to open up through our central channel, the very same space. So having that sense in the lower belly of the space beyond birth and death, beyond all causes and conditions, this ultimate of the ultimate of the ultimate, which is our own true nature, we're going to open it up through the central channel. So have the sense on each in-breath of opening that space and bringing it up. Half inch by half inch on each breath. So that very same cosmic space, really, because that's what it is. It's the fundamental space of reality that we have discovered in our lower belly. We are now breathing, using the breath as a way to open it up through our central channel up to the back of our head. Step by step, breath by breath, behind our navel. Opening that central channel space behind our solar plexus. Behind our throat, our heart, and then our throat. Up to the back of our head. So now this corridor of space from the empty, open source in the lower belly up to the back of our head. And that is the core of our being. It holds, as I said, the totality of who we have ever been, the true person that we are now, and the person that we must become in this life to find our deepest human purpose and fulfillment. More we rest in that space, deeper our connection with that space, the more our life becomes a mountain cataract of creativity and realization. When we have connected in the Shikantaza posture with the central channel as it arises out of the hara, out of the lower dantian, out of what's known in Tibetan Buddhism as the secret center, the more we connect with that core, the more we begin to feel our body and this is a body filled with all this juice and all this joy of life. Our body becomes a life bubbling with happiness and pleasure and creativity and discovery and birth and death. This is the body that loves. This is the body of compassion. The empty, open core of our basic being, the primordial, timeless space we discover in the lower belly, the way that core provides the corridor along our central channel, our basic, fundamental core of our person. That space, by its very nature, loves. It beholds, it appreciates, it feels tenderness for all of the life that is happening in our body and all of the life that is happening around us. So see if you can feel breathing into the lower belly, and we're letting the awareness, the open, empty space of our basic nature fill our central channel. And relaxing into that, feeling the juice and the joy of our somatic being, the beauty and the wonder of our own life right now. See if you can feel that. Breathing into the lower belly, feeling the awareness of our central channel. And then feeling the life of our body as an expression, a joyful and free expression of that basic, eternal and infinite space. And then sensing with our body the life around us. The breathing, living people and the animals and the plants and the oceans and the mountains and the sky, all breathing, all aware, and feeling that in our body. There's a Vajrayana teaching, extraordinarily profound, that our state of being is a state of being of utter love, of connection, communication, communion, and union with everything that is. Deeper we go into the natural state of our central channel and abide in the unborn part of ourselves, the more we feel in that way toward the world. And it's very somatic. We feel in our body the totality because our body has no bounds. So as we're sitting here, just let yourself open. Let down the boundaries of your body and let your somatic awareness fly free beyond the oceans, beyond the solar system to the ends of the universe. Just let your awareness fly free. Your somatic awareness, your feeling of being alive. Open and extend, open, open, let go. Opening your body to the entire universe. At this point, we don't need words like compassion or loving kindness or mercy or empathy, because our state of being is a state of utter bodily love. It's our condition. It was always there. But through the somatic practices, it becomes a matter of personal experience and then a matter of personal realization. Just keep letting go and opening. Okay, we could hang out literally forever in this space, but out of respect for the causes and conditions of our world, I'm going to invite Elizabeth to come over and help us out. One thing, just a couple of things while we're getting set up here. When you send your questions in, I'd like to ask you to really pare them down to 1 or 2 or at most 3 sentences. What I've noticed with some of the really long questions is that there are often many questions in there, and the real question sometimes gets lost in the process. So just a humble request for you to keep your questions extraordinarily brief, and we'll prioritize those questions. And the other thing is, would you try to come as much as you can out of your own personal experience? If I get a kind of more of an academic or intellectual question, while those are important, they're not nearly as valuable, I think, for you personally and for everybody, as the question that is really your question and your existential query or quandary or dilemma at this exact moment. So let's try to work on that, for next time. Elizabeth, what's happening?
So for this week, I went ahead and edited some of the longer questions down to a shorter question. So
okay.
Listen out for your question. It might be slightly different than what you emailed in. And I'll say your name before I read it.
Great, thank you. Good.
The first one is from Virginia in Uruguay, as we would say.
Yes, very good.
I wonder how I can discriminate whether what I experience during meditation is a somatic experience or a conceptualization of what you have called the left side of the brain. I find this to be a major obstacle in my meditation practice, to know if I'm really meditating or if I am imagining I am meditating.
Well, I think first of all, this is, very important distinction in meditation practice of all sorts. The difference, to begin to be able to ascertain the difference between what we call direct experience or naked experience on the one hand, and conceptualized versions of experience on the other, what we think. And I grant you that in the beginning, we often cannot tell the difference, or maybe we start to begin to tell the difference, but we don't know if we can trust it. So there's a lot of learning up front as we move to figure out which is which. There's no problem in that. The important point is to do the somatic practices as described. And the thing about somatic practice, working directly with the body, is that when you are paying attention to your body, it could be the breath at the tip of the nose, but I think much more effectively, it's places in your body. It's your feet, it's your ankles, it's the interior of your lower belly, it's your central channel. When you pay attention in that way, and you are truly feeling your body, then the thinking mind at that moment is offline. You can't be completely in your body and invested in thinking about it at the same time. You kind of have to make a choice. As the great Mahasiddha Saraha said, there are only 2 options. One is to think about it, and the other one is to experience it directly. The tremendous power and virtue of working directly with the body in meditation is that we begin to be able to feel the direct experience, which is the body's experience, the naked experience, in a more and more clear way. As we do that, then we can begin to see, oh, I just departed and I'm thinking about something. But I think it takes time. The important point is doing the practice in a very steady way, and over time we do become very, very clear when we're there and when we're not there, somatically.
This question is from Riley.
Mm-hmm.
I like your teachings about meditation and the connection to the earth. When you talk about the Vajrayana with its yidams, deities, etc., it seems religious to me, and I don't understand how this relates to that basic love and connection to the earth.
Mm-hmm. Very good question. I think it's true that, first of all, when we take a look at the iconography of Tibetan Buddhism, it seems very other. It doesn't seem particularly human. And I must confess, most of the teaching on Vajrayana does present it as an otherworldly tradition, in the sense that, we're visualizing, for example, white Tara here is different from us. White Tara is a kind of, divine presence, and we're trying to visualize her, and we're trying to, connect with her, and we're trying to experience ourselves as her. All of the, that's one of the big problems with Tibetan Buddhism, is that it comes off as being not really deeply connected with ordinary reality and ordinary life. And it's very ironic, because what the Vajrayana is about is ordinary experience stripped of interpretation. It's about groundedness in the reality of our incarnation. And it's about discovering that the life that we have is, on its own terms and without any add-ons, ultimate reality, discovering in the relative the ultimate. So we could say, well, how is a yidam really, like white Tara, how is that related to our person? What Tibetan Buddhism and Vajrayana Buddhism is trying to do is trying to get us to set aside our normal habitual way of thinking of ourselves as a defiled and solid human person. And in the Vajrayana, the way they try to get us to set that aside is by giving us an alternative visualization of ourselves as a deity. But here's another way to approach it, and this is what I do in my teaching. I'm suggesting that our human body, in and of itself, once we strip it of interpretation, once we remove the add-ons of valuation, conceptualizing, and labeling from it, this body of ours is a sacred reality. We don't have to visualize ourselves as yidam, we just have to connect with who we actually are. And as you know, many of you who have heard my teaching, I say that the three bodies of the Buddha are our own very human body, our very own human body. The emptiness is Dharmakaya, the energy is the Sambhogakaya, and the way we manifest creatively and selflessly is the Nirmanakaya. That's us, that's who we are. So that's really what yidam practice is about, but unfortunately, the way it is often taught, and I think even understood in some of the Asian cultures, is something really quite different from what I'm talking about here. But in my study, this is really what made Chogyam Trungpa so interesting, and also, I would say, rather very, very challenging person, because he did not go along with the conventional interpretations of Vajrayana Buddhism of his culture. He taught it the way I'm teaching it to you, which is, it's about us, it's about the sacredness of our spontaneous human experience, and it's about the body or the soma or the incarnation we have once we see it purely and truly and immaculately from its own side.
Mm-hmm. This is from Tanya in Hamburg, Germany.
Mm-hmm.
When I connect to the portal in the sacrum area, or when I sit in shikantaza, I experience a pulsation in my body from the bottom to the top. It also has a slight forward and backward movement, or in a circle. It seems to be connected to the stillness, or that it appears from there. It is different than other involuntary body movements I have experienced in meditation. What is this, and is it something I should pay attention to?
Well, a lot of things, when we connect with the what we could call the natural state, the unborn and undying awareness that's at the root of our personality, of our whole being. When we connect with that, in a way, it liberates our experience of our body. It liberates our sense perceptions. And all kinds of experiences arise from that space. For example, even the way you see things is going to change. And, I have one student who thought she was losing her eyesight because she, when she was practicing, she began to realize that she didn't see things in any kind of normal way. And she'd look at a tree and she'd see something she'd never seen before. But she wasn't losing her eyesight. She was actually deconstructing the habitual nature of the way in which she looked at things. And the same thing is true with the inside of our body. We begin to experience all kinds of pulsations and energy waves and movements. We begin to be able to track the, even when you breathe, there's a subtle movement of the sacrum that tips forward on the in-breath and tips back on the out-breath. And that movement, as Ida Rolf stated, actually, for a body that's truly open, it affects every other joint in the body, including the sutras at the top of the skull. Everything is moving. So my suggestion is twofold. First of all, it's very important we don't get hung up on unusual experiences. Unfortunately, sometimes we become almost mesmerized by the way in which we see or taste or feel or notice things in our body, and we become actually distracted, by those experiences because we try to hang on to them or repeat them. So number one is don't hang on, to anything that comes up. Let it come and let it go. And the second thing is your primary connection needs to be with the empty space always, with the emptiness in your body. What I say sometimes is 70% of our awareness is resting in the natural state, and the other 30 is making room for and receiving and being aware of the energy and the movement, the creativity that comes out of that space. But it's very important, as our practice progresses, to stay very deeply rooted in the unborn, and that's really what our practice is all about. It's cultivating that relationship with the part of ourselves that was never born and will never die, strangely enough. And when we do that, then the human life that we need to live unfolds in a very free and spontaneous and pure way, and we don't get stuck.
My computer's not loading very well, but luckily I have a question that I remember. Mm-hmm. And it's a question that I've actually had a lot of meditation students ask me. And it's just about when someone's descending down into the earth, doing the earth breathing practice. The question is, what am I descending into? People talk about, am I going into the actual rocks and dirt and magma? Am I going into the energy of the earth? Or is it my awareness extending into the space it's always been? Or what is it that one can say is happening in the earth descent? What earth am I descending into?
Well, I understand the question, but nobody is going to tell you what's going to happen. Well, maybe somebody's going to tell you, but they shouldn't. With Chogyam Trungpa and with other really good Tibetan meditation teachers, I was never told what was going to happen. I remember many times Chogyam Trungpa would give us a new practice, and in the 70s, there weren't a lot of Tibetan teachers around, and every practice pretty much that he gave us in the first, 5 or 6 years, no one really knew anything about. We might have read about it. We knew nothing. And frequently, one of us would ask him, well, Rinpoche, what's going on here? And he would say, we'll have to see. And the number of times, even in my own personal life, when things were going on, that excuse me, I felt I really needed an answer. He just said, we'll have to see. Time will tell. He just wouldn't answer the question. And that's a very, very compassionate thing to do, in retrospect, I realize, because that gave me the maximum possibility of making my own discoveries. And ultimately, that is what we have to do, no matter what our teacher says. It's our own personal experiential discoveries that really count. So I think, I am going to say something about this question, but generally speaking, it's not helpful to give you some kind of format about what you're going to experience when you do this or how you should understand it. The important point is you're opening your body downward. You're not leaving behind your body, you're not dissociating, but you're opening your somatic awareness so that it's more expansive downward. And you're letting your awareness of your body, in your body, go down, 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 down. And you are seeing what you experience and what you discover. And that's really the only thing that I really can say. I can't say anything more. If you were sitting here with me individually, we could talk about it and you could tell me what you experienced and we could discuss that. But it's so different, and it's so different for different people at different times. But it's not what we think. Even if we think we're opening into empty space, that may be sort of true, but the details, the nitty-gritty reality of what actually happens is going to be different. And you as a practitioner need to just be 100% on deck and 100% alert to see what happens and how it feels in your body as it extends and opens downward. And then the answers will come. But then you as a meditation teacher, if somebody asked you that question, you shouldn't necessarily be reporting your experience to them, because that's going to limit what they experience. So we're talking about something very, very radical here. We're talking about meeting reality without a template and without preconceptions that we normally have, without the blinders of our assumptions that we carry around with us. We're talking about, whether it's the earth or anything else, meeting reality that nakedly and that openly and seeing what happens. And what happens is not going to be something that we ever could have expected. That's known as the magic of the Vajrayana, that there's a reality beyond thought that is far more compelling and creative and loving than anything that we could ever have come up with.
Fantastic. Thanks. This is from Sarah in Tasmania, Australia.
Mm-hmm.
I am curious to hear your perspective on balancing the inward contemplative journey of focused meditation practice with the intensive engagement required for raising a young child, particularly for a full-time solo older parent.
Mm-hmm.
Which practice forms would you recommend for a time-constrained environment or to become more embodied while on the run with a child?
I would say, of course, obviously, you've had this question yourself with your child, your small baby. How old is your child now?
She's a year now.
She's a year old, yeah. Oh, it was only yesterday. And it's a question that comes up often, in our community. And basically, I think, my answer is, through the somatic practices, learn to behold your child in all of your interactions with your body. Behold your child with your body. Make room for your child in the feeling of your soma. Now this sounds like maybe terribly simplistic, but what happens in family situations, ones that are very, very claustrophobic, which they all are, one way or the other, is that we tend to become, in a way, run down by the extent to which what happens in our families goes against what we want to see happen, what we think should be happening, our expectations, our assumptions, our plans. There's this feeling of continual disruption of what we're trying to accomplish, with our families and with our children, and that's exhausting. That is really exhausting. But the interesting point is that's the human ego that's getting worn down, which is why the raising, marriage and children and raising a family is such a powerful spiritual practice, because the approach of the ego gets worn down. But there is a more direct approach through the somatic practices, and this is what I teach my students. Be in your body when you're with your child, and see how what your body, so to speak, thinks, how your body senses and feels and intuits about the situation. From the body's point of view, everything that is going on is exactly what needs to go on. The resistance of the ego is just an add-on, it's not necessary. So I think, having a small baby could be one of the most powerful somatic practices that we could ever imagine, if we are willing to have that kind of surrender into our soma and into what the soma knows, and into the okayness that the soma feels about whatever situation is going on, the workability of whatever situation is going on. The soma, without the overlay of the paranoid, freaked out ego, is completely relaxed and totally tuned in to your baby.
You gave me that practice at VTI.
I did.
And I've been exploring it a bit.
What have you found? Does it work?
Yeah, I'll try to relate to Serena from my heart space, the space behind my heart. And my experience is she relaxes right away.
Yeah.
It's like a palpable shift in her body, actually.
Yeah, that's great.
And what I really feel is that she's just saying, see me, which we all say. That's what we all want. But when I feel her frustration or that things aren't flowing the way I want, there's that push in the space, and if I can just drop in, there's an immediate relaxation and openness, and it feels like things just flow in a new direction that I didn't see before, or sometimes if I'm just nursing her or whatever, but there's a relaxation and openness, and I tune into her space and her profundity, and it's such a gift for me.
That's beautiful. Wow.
Amazing experience. So, yeah.
Yeah, I must confess, I think you know this, you've seen it, but I have become incredibly attracted to babies over the last number of years. And I would rather hang out with babies than anybody else, because their minds are so incredibly interesting and open and alive and sensitive, and they're picking up so much. Mm-hmm. And it's not complicated, particularly before they talk.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. The other piece I guess I would say is I've noticed that my formal practice, I really dive in. It's like I dive in the deep end right away because I don't have very much time. Yeah. Whereas before there was kind of the space, like sometimes I just kind of hang out for a while and relax. And now it's like I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to dive
That's
into
really
the deep
good.
end as
Oh, it's
fast
really
as I
true.
can.
Yeah, I feel that too. That's really good. Yeah. You just go for it.
Yeah.
There's no time to tiptoe.
Time is precious.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Alex from Colorado asks, I have extreme difficulty with single-pointed meditation. I tend to freeze, hold my breath, and go into a panic. This does not happen when I allow myself to feel the sensations of breathing throughout my whole body. Mm-hmm. How can I do this when every attempt evokes such extreme emotions?
With every attempt what?
Every time he tries to do single-pointed meditation, he has this really intense reaction.
Yeah, honestly, with all due respect to Buddhist history and everything, single-pointed meditation is, most of the time, I don't really find it's really very helpful for anybody. Rinpoche used to call it mental gymnastics, that you're trying to take a mind that is basically very unruly and you're trying to narrow it down to a single point. Now, there's a big difference between single-pointed meditation, where we are trying to capture infinity into a grain of sand with our ego, and then there's a big difference between that and actually paying attention to a region in our body. Now, he mentioned breathing through his whole body, and we, in our lineage, we do something called whole body breathing. Have I taught that during any of the live streams yet or not? I'll try to teach that to you, but it's basically, it's following an early Buddhist text where the Buddha says, breathing in, the whole body breathes. Breathing out, the whole body breathes. Meaning that we breathing in, we breathe through all the pores of our body into our interior. And that kind of practice where you are paying attention, but it's not trying to like narrow anything down or restrict anything, that's very, very helpful and very good. So, somatic practice of mindfulness is very helpful, very important and necessary. But the one-pointed thing, particularly in his case, I would never do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Never. I would just let it go. It's not right. You can tell it's not right. His body's
Right.
telling him, don't do it. So
Yeah.
my question is, why aren't you listening?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So beyond Alex's situation, I mean, my understanding in a lot of the lineages is to develop discipline.
Yeah.
Do you feel like full body breathing, for example, you can cultivate that same discipline as you would with a single pointed tip of the nose or whatever meditation?
Well, discipline is very tricky. Discipline for what? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
presence, yes. You see, the thing is, this is a difference between the Vajrayana approach and some other approaches. Some other approaches, you're trying to pay attention and you're trying to get your mind to slow down and become peaceful. And it's a struggle. Again, if you read this book by Chogyam Trungpa, Path is the Goal, he calls that approach mental gymnastics. And I'm not saying it doesn't have any value, but what we do is different. What we do is we tap into a level of the mind, of awareness that is already peaceful and already completely 100% open and present. That's what we're looking for, to tap into something that's already there rather than trying to, it's called working from the inside out, what we do. And when you do that, the deeper you rest, like in the meditation we just did, the deeper you rest in the unborn space of your own human body, the less compelling the thoughts become, and eventually they become irrelevant and uninteresting, and they just kind of are like a flock of birds in the distance flying away. And so there's a real difference here between taking the natural wakefulness of the body as the object of meditation and then taking the breath and trying to come in from the outside. A huge difference in methodology.
Yeah, thanks.
And that's the difference between somatic meditation and more the left brain approach. The left brain approach is you take something and you're trying to accomplish something. The somatic approach is you tap into what's already there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This leads nicely into our next question from
Oh.
Emily in Colorado.
Mhm.
How do you relate to thoughts in your lineage? Do they have any significance?
Thoughts have no significance whatsoever. But the thing is, they do happen and they can be useful. But significance arrives in experience. Import arrives in experience. We discover meaningfulness in our life. Normally what the ego does is that it takes an experience and it tries to attribute meaning to it or attribute significance to it. And once again, this is a difference between a left brain approach to spirituality and somatic spirituality. In somatic spirituality, we discover in our own preconceptual experience, the experience that arises in our body before we put any concepts or interpretations or any kind of meaningful import on the experience that as it arrives at the door naked already has the full import and the full significance already present in it. So thoughts are different. Thoughts are kind of expressions of basic experience, and in that sense, while they themselves are not significant, they can be useful, and they're very useful for communicating to other people, particularly when those thoughts are grounded in experience. Very useful for sorting things out, very useful for, engaging in our very important ego activities of management and the executive functions of our prefrontal cortex and so on. But thoughts themselves do not hold ultimate significance at all.
This question is from Braxton here in Boulder. I felt so much inspiration watching your evening with Anam Tupten the other night.
Mm-hmm.
It really lit the fire of inspiration to practice in me strongly. Since I began working with Dharma Ocean, I have let go of seeing my conventional life as something separate from practice or retreat, and I want to honor this energy in a new way. He's really a devoted practitioner with a lot of
Oh, that's
history
wonderful.
and experience.
Yeah, wonderful.
I admire how you have integrated this desire for deep practice while remaining involved in the world in a deep way. How much daily and retreat practice do you suggest for someone who feels inspired to do the work, to have the depth of experiential understanding you and various masters have realized?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for teachings and inspiration.
Mm-hmm. It's very individual, actually. Anup Thupten has his history in Tibet and what he did, and I have my history and my unique circumstances, meeting Chogyam Trungpa and being able to do a lot of practice in my life. But I also meet people today who are, in my opinion, a lot more ripened than I was when I began, and realization for them, for me, I mean, truthfully, I've probably done 40,000 hours of meditation, and I needed every single one of them. And it's a very important part of my life. There are people coming along now I do not think need anything near that to really find some deep realization in their state of being. So it is very individual. I mean, frankly, and now I'm talking really to, is his name Braxton?
Braxton.
Braxton, yeah. I mean, I would do as much as you can. Obviously you have a tremendous amount of inspiration and motivation, but at the same time there are going to be the limitations of your ordinary life. If you can find a way to do a couple of hours every morning, that would be wonderful. A lot of people do absolutely fine with much less. If you can do solitary retreats, that would be wonderful. If you can come to intensive programs, particularly while I'm still teaching, and at my age, who knows how long that's going to last, that would be wonderful. So my general feeling is do as much as you can given your life circumstances, and I really do trust that for each one of us that's going to be the right amount.
Mm-hmm.
And you said something really interesting. You said that with your child, because you have so little time, that when you sit down, you just go for it. And the other thing I've noticed is, particularly with mothers, you have the capacity to go for it that you wouldn't have had 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another example of how you can't really generalize very much about length of time and all that kind of stuff. It's so individual, yeah.
I've noticed that with solitary as well. Sometimes I'll have an incredibly profound 3-day solitary.
Yeah.
And the same happens in a 2-week solitary. But, I mean, there's always that depth and expansion, but it's kind of like what has to happen will happen in whatever time it has.
That's exactly right. Yes, that's exactly. The lineage really, they know what they're doing. Yeah, and they make it happen. If you have 5 minutes, they're going to make it happen.
That said, he and I were discussing about longer retreat, and I remember you and I once talked about me doing a long retreat, and you were saying that the mind just gets used to it after a while.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is an interesting exploration, and he was saying he felt that happen at his 3-month retreat, that got to a place where it was just kind of hanging out a little bit. Well, things were happening, but curious, just again, we know it's individual, but your sense of long retreat for a lay person and that flow in and out of life.
It's very powerful, yeah, it's very true. And I think I mentioned quite often that people that I know that have done 3-year retreats, they almost develop a habitual retreat mind and they stop growing after a while. It's not helpful, and Trungpa Rinpoche wasn't in favor of it. If you happen to be a tulku in Tibet and you had 20 practices that you were responsible for transmitting, then the 3-year retreat made a lot of sense. And that's why they did the 3-year retreats. It was so you had enough time to do enough practice of each of the main practices in your lineage so that you could be an authority. But Rinpoche always liked this sort of back and forth thing and keeping yourself off balance. It's very interesting in Tibetan tradition that the people who were long-term retreatants were constantly moving caves, and Petra Rinpoche, for example, this wonderful Mahasiddha, 19th century Mahasiddha, when he would leave an area, he would leave all his food. He knew how to keep himself off balance the whole entire time, and he would not know if he was going to get any food that day. But that was his way, and he used to sleep in ditches. He was a great Rinpoche. He could have had all kinds of wonderful accommodations, but he didn't do it because he knew in long retreat you actually have to find a way to stay off balance. And the interesting thing about daily life is we do have a way to stay off balance, which is having kids and having a spouse and having a job. So we're always off balance. And as long as practice is the foundation of our life, from Rinpoche's teaching, that's the most powerful situation you could ever have. And I do believe in India it was very similar among these lay Vajrayana people. That was the powerful package, was daily life with a foundation of practice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's all of our questions for
That's
today.
it? Okay, very good. Okay, let's just sit for a minute here together and take a few breaths. Come into our body. And especially into our heart. And see if you can feel the space there. See if you can feel the warmth and a kind of very subtle, blissful glittering of the space. And then we'll close with the Dharma Ocean Bow, which Anup Tupten has said he started doing spontaneously, which is interesting. And it goes like this. Hands over the heart, left hand under the right, acknowledging our heart connection with each other, our entrainment with each other, and then we bow. So as I mentioned, next week I will be in Crestone with Anam, and I'm not sure what we're going to do something during this space, and I'm not exactly sure what it is. We'll probably post something on the internet. I've got some ideas, and the staff has some ideas. We'll let you know, but I won't be here in Boulder anyway, and then the week after I will be back. So wishing you the best and sending you, as we say, a lot of love in the practicing lineage.